Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Worton. This podcast is all about our journey into the woods of ourselves, getting to know who we are, and where we're going in life so that we can create the life that we want to live. It's about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. It's also about mindset. Our beliefs are such an important part of this journey, and there are so many ways for us to change our mindset so that we can more easily live a life of expansive joy. This podcast is also about going literally into the woods and spending time in nature, and how that can help us on our own personal journey of self-knowledge. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now let's get into this week's episode. Hello, adventurers, and welcome to the Into the Woods podcast, episode 488. This is your host, Holly Worton, and I'm back with another solo episode. Today, I'm talking about when your adventures scare you. Now, a few weeks back, on episode 483 with Erica Terblanche, we briefly discussed the importance of choosing things that you're terrified of, and that concept really stuck in my mind. Fear is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, and I know I'm always talking about the importance of stepping outside of your comfort zone, and that's because I've been doing that a lot lately, especially in the last 6 months. This is kind of another aspect of the same thing, and I hope that you find it interesting and useful because I think a lot of people, myself included, make decisions to avoid certain things that we might want to do because we're afraid. And that's totally natural, but I think there's a lot of good things to come from facing our fears. So today I'm going to be talking about fear. What is it? Why is it important? What are the benefits of facing fear? How to respond in the face of fear? How to do mindset work to make it easier? And how you might want to get started facing your fears today. But before we get into this week's episode, I wanted to share a question from a listener. So it was someone who listened to episode 486, where I talked about getting comfortable with discomfort. And the question said, really good thoughts about pushing oneself out of the comfort zone. For people like me, this is exceedingly hard to do, even though I agree with you that the best experiences happen when one does that. I find that I like my creature comforts, which include being in my comfort zone. Being an armchair traveler or adventurer is far less risky than actually doing it in the wild. While it's easy to say take a risk or get out of your comfort zone, the question becomes how do I do this and A, retain control, or B, not feel the risk? The solution is probably being comfortable with the idea that one cannot control the risk. Any ideas on how to do this? So this is a great question, and my answer to this would be to do mindset work. And I know that's my answer to a lot of things, but that's really how I've transformed my life in the last 9 years. That's how I ended up doing all the things that I do that a decade ago I would have been too scared to do. Or I wouldn't have even entertained the thought because I just would have assumed I can't do that thing. So I don't know if there's a way to get out of your comfort zone and retain control. And I think you will feel the risk. But I think if you do the mindset work, then that makes you more comfortable with feeling the risk, makes you more comfortable stepping outside of your comfort zone, makes you more comfortable feeling uncomfortable. And the way I do that is I work with PSYCH-K, which is a great technique that reprograms beliefs at the subconscious level. But I've also had a lot of really great experience with NLP and particularly timeline therapy. And I've talked a lot about work that I've done in the past with my sports mindset in terms of working with someone to use timeline therapy to improve my sports mindset. And it's been really, really life-changing for me. So I would say find a technique that you like. And if you don't know of any, then I would say just go with NLP or PSYCH-K. PSYCH-K I will always recommend because it's just been so easy to use and it's completely changed my life. And I will link to that into the show notes. And then NLP is neuro-linguistic programming. And that's, I think, one of the more common techniques like this. It's been around for years. And I will link to the person who I have seen to help me with my sports mindset, whose name is Jane Talbot. And Jane has been a guest on this podcast a couple of times. So I'll link to Jane's website and to her episodes in the show notes. So that's my answer, mindset work. The next thing I wanted to mention is that I was recently a guest on Cara Wilde's podcast. Cara, I'm sure you've heard on this show before. She's been a guest on the show many, many times. And we've been friends for years. And so I've been on her podcast before. She had paused her podcast for a while and she's recently relaunched it. So in this episode, we talk about tree communication and nature and the benefits of connecting with nature and trees in particular. And I think you'll probably find the episode interesting. So if you head over to hollyworton.com/Cara, that's C-A-R-A, you can find that episode that redirects straight to her website. And as always, I will include this in the show notes. So that's enough of that, and let's get into this week's episode, talking about fear. So what is fear? Fear is defined as an unpleasant, often strong emotion caused by anticipation or awareness of danger. So sometimes you're actually in danger, like you're about to fall off a cliff, and you are aware that the danger is there, and it gives you that sensation of fear. Sometimes it's the anticipation of something that's going to happen, something that you know is coming, and it makes you fearful. And that leads me to the next question. What are the different types of fear? There's basically two different types of fear, rational fear and irrational fear. Rational fear is when you're standing on a cliff and you're about to fall off, or hopefully not, but that danger is there. It is real, tangible danger. You are on a narrow trail. The trail may be eroding. You need to do something to ensure your safety. That fear and danger is real, and the fear is rational. Irrational fear is worrying about stuff that you don't know if it's going to happen, because it's not right now in the moment. It's in the future. It might happen. It might not happen. Who knows? That's why it's irrational fear, because it's not imminent, clear danger. So why is fear important? Fear helps to protect us. It alerts us to danger and prepares us to deal with it by letting us know that we're in a sticky situation. So again, going back to that situation of a trail, you might be about to fall off a cliff. Like, the fear alerts you to the fact that you are in a not very good situation and you need to do something to avoid getting hurt. That's important. That's good. That's useful. The irrational fear is what most of us feel, because most of us aren't facing death every day of our lives. The irrational fear is what most of us feel, and it can be really debilitating. It can prevent us from doing the things we want to do. It can prevent us from having the adventures we want to have. It can prevent us from making important decisions in our lives. This concept of irrational fear really goes beyond just the realm of outdoor adventures and spreads to all areas of our lives. But the good thing is, if you learn to face your fear in the realm of outdoor adventures, that will have ripple effects that will make it easier to face fear in other areas of your life, and vice versa. So what are the benefits of facing fear? You develop strength, internal strength. You just become a strong person. It gives you courage to face difficult situations. It gives you confidence in yourself. It helps you develop self-trust because you've gotten through a scary situation. You've gotten through a challenging situation. You came out the other side and you can trust yourself now in similar situations in the future or other scary situations in the future because you got yourself through it. It helps you develop resilience, not just physical resilience, but mental resilience. And facing fear, when you face fear, it teaches you that you can do hard things and survive and thrive. And when you face your fear, you'll probably learn something, not just about the situation and how to get out of a situation like that in the future, but about yourself. And as I said just a minute ago, when you face your fear, it can help you with taking other risks in your life. You know, a lot of times we get to a point in our life where we have to make an important decision and we're afraid because it's a big decision. If we take that path, what's going to happen? If we take the other path, what's going to happen? You don't know. And you can't know because you can only imagine. And sometimes we're afraid to take that big risk. But when we face our fear in other areas of our life, it helps us when we get to those big moments where we have to make a big decision. Another benefit of facing fear is that you won't be left with regrets. You won't be left wondering, what if I'd done that? What if I'd taken that path? What if I'd made that decision? You won't be left wondering that because you did the thing that you were afraid to do. So how can you respond in the face of fear? So for example, the reason I'm doing this episode now, it's very timely. It's because this is the last week before my black belt grading. And we had our advanced grading practice last Friday. And it's like the reality of this really hit me. Like, I know I've been preparing for this thing for the last 7 years, but really the last 6 months. But it really hit me that, like, this is it. It's coming. And I don't have that much time left to prepare for it. Like, I've got a new plan on like the last kind of few things that I'm going to practice this week. But really, I've done what I've done to train for it. Like, there's nothing I'm going to do this week that's going to make a huge difference except just practicing the things I have to practice. And another thing that really scared me was when I saw that I'm the only adult from our school that's grading. There was going to be a few other people that I knew from class that were going to do their grading as well. And so I was really looking forward to that because it's nice to do these advanced gradings with people you know, because it just helps to kind of have that support from someone else that you know and to kind of help each other out and just kind of mental support as well. But no, it's just me and a bunch of kids. And of course, I can't be dumping my fears on a bunch of kids. So I'm going to have to be the adult in this situation. And that really scares me. It just scares me going into this alone because every other time that I've done an advanced grading, there have been friends from school, people I know. And so I think that was like an unexpected, unpleasant surprise that kind of amped up my fear even more. And then our teacher sat us down and gave us a talk about the importance of the black belt and why very few people have it because you have to work so hard to get it, and talking to us about the grading and how this grading is designed to break you and it's designed to push you to your limits and then beyond. And it just got really real. So that's why this is very timely for me. And probably in a few weeks, you'll get another episode about the other side of this thing. But right now, I'm kind of terrified. So I'm evaluating. How can I respond in the face of this fear? Like, how do I deal with this week? How do I deal with it next weekend? So here are my suggestions and some things that I plan to do. So I think the important thing is to not ignore the fear. Like, look at it. Is it rational or irrational? And in this case, it's irrational. Like, I'm not in danger right now. Might be in danger next weekend, but hopefully not. But it's a rational fear. And remember that sometimes fear shows us what not to do. So obviously don't ignore that. If you are literally walking into danger, and that's why you're afraid, pay attention to that and act accordingly. But tune into the fear and be honest with yourself. What kind of fear is it? Ask yourself, what's the worst that can happen? And really explore that, so that you can either plan for those situations or prevent them. So for example, what's the worst that could happen? I mean, logically, I could get injured. People have gotten injured in the past on their black belt gradings. People have ended up in the hospital. That could happen, but it doesn't usually happen. And that's not really what I'm worried about. I'm really worried about failing. Like, in the dark parts of my mind, like, that's the worst that could happen. So how can I plan for that? How can I plan to avoid it? How can I plan to prevent that situation? You know, I've got 5 days left to prepare. So I've got a new plan about how I'm going to eat this week, how I'm going to practice this week, how I'm going to go to class this week, how I'm going to hydrate this week, supplements that I'm going to be taking. Like, I'm doing everything that I can to get my body and my mind ready to go into the grading on Saturday and Sunday. And I'm going to be paying attention to my mindset as well. I'm going to talk about this more in a few minutes, but I'm going to be paying attention to my mindset this week and writing down all the different aspects of my fear so that I can work on it. So really explore what's the worst that could happen so you can prepare for it or plan to prevent it. And then think about other times you've faced fears and learn that you were overreacting, because you might be overreacting this time too. And I think that's a really important one. There have been so many times when I've been afraid of doing something. Like the last 3 times that I've done advanced gradings. They weren't my black belt grading, but they were a similar kind of thing. And I was so scared and I was so worried I wouldn't make it through. And it was hard. And I got through. Like, the fears didn't help. Like, my worst case scenario never happened and I was fine. So I think it can be really helpful to remember times when you've overreacted with fear and it was unfounded. And then remember that every time you face fear, it's like building a muscle. It just gets easier. And it gets easier and easier and easier every time you choose to face fear. And I think it's also helpful to acknowledge or to be aware of the fact that exposure therapy is a really common way of treating phobias. So this is a legitimate way of working with fear. There's a book that I've never read, but it's very well known, called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And that's pretty much what we're talking about here. However, it can be really nerve-wracking to face a scary situation like this. And so that's why I'm such a fan of doing mindset work to make it easier. Now, I don't expect there's going to be a point where I wake up next Saturday morning and I think, I'm so excited for this. I would love to get to that point. Maybe I need to do some more mindset work this week to get to that point. But I don't expect to have a complete 180 shift in the next 5 days. However, there's a lot I can do to just make it easier and to shift my perspective and to shift my fear and to shift my opinions and to shift the way I'm looking at this situation. So instead of being a scary thing, to look at it as this thing that so many people have gone through and survived and they've passed and, you achieve the thing. So really dig up those fears. You might want to do some journaling. Look them in the face and figure out what you're afraid of. So I'm afraid of failing. I am afraid a little bit of getting injured. There's one instructor in particular that I'm really afraid of having to spar with. I'm really afraid of not being able to do it, of not having the energy to get through the weekend. It's 2 days. I'm afraid of feeling like a failure. Like, really look into all the different aspects of those fears. And they're not fun. And I think sometimes it's hard to acknowledge that we have all these different fears. Ultimately, it all boils down to I'm afraid of not being good enough to get my black belt. And I've been doing a ton of mindset work on that. Stuff is shifting. I'm feeling better. But that's at the root of everything that's going on for me right now. So face those fears. Figure out what you want instead. So how do you want to feel? I want to feel confident. I want to feel calm. I want to feel energized. I want to feel confident in my ability to pass. I want to feel like I'm good enough to get my black belt, all that stuff. Create belief statements that support what you do want. That alone is a huge mindset shift from focusing on what you don't want to focusing on what you do want. That alone is huge. PSYCH-K takes that one step further, and then it programs those belief statements into your subconscious mind. That has been super life-changing for me, and that's why I recommend it. But just making that shift from what you don't want to what you do want, that's huge, because I think a lot of us get so wrapped up in what we don't want and in running away from what we don't want that we don't know where we're going. But once you know where you're going, what you do want, it makes it so much easier to achieve that. And then when you're in the scary situation, remind yourself of the saying, this too shall pass. I always thought from the Bible, but when I looked this up, it was an old Persian saying, this too shall pass. It's not forever. It will end. It's just 5 hours on Saturday, 8 hours on Sunday, and then it's over. That's it. So I would like to encourage you to get started facing your fears today. Here are some questions you can ask yourself. What's something you want to do, but are afraid of doing? What adventures are calling to you, but you don't think you're good enough, strong enough, fast enough to do them? What's still on my list? Wild camping alone. I still haven't done that. That's on my list. What's on your list? And do you have any phobias? Can you start by safely exposing yourself to these things? Maybe with professional help. Remember that exposure therapy is a really common way of treating phobias. So if you need help, get a professional to support you in this and try working through those. Like I said, it will have a ripple effect on other areas of your life. And finally, I would like to end with a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt. It's such a good quote. You gain strength, courage, and confidence by every experience in which you really stop to look fear in the face. You are able to say to yourself, I have lived through this horror. I can take the next thing that comes along. You must do the thing you think you cannot do. So, I'd like to ask you, what is the next thing you think you cannot do that you'd actually like to try? Write that down and then start making plans to do it. And remember, you don't have to do it alone. you can get help. You can find people to do the thing with. And let me know. Drop me a line. You can email me at holly@hollywharton.com or find me online and get in touch there and let me know what's the scary thing that you're going to try. I wish you the best of luck with it. If you enjoyed this episode, you might want to check out one of these related episodes. 486, I talk about how outdoor adventures can help us to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. 483, I speak with Erica Terblanche about how nature helps us unlock our highest potential. 462, I discuss overcoming the fear of solo walking and adventures. 457, I speak with Sarah K. Brandis about running for better mental health and riding to conquer your fears. 331, I talk about facing your fears and overcoming them. So this is clearly not the first time I've covered this topic. I hope you find this interesting and useful. I hope it helps you to face your fears. And I look forward to hearing about what fears you choose to face and how it goes for you. So thank you very much. And remember to visit hollywharton.com/488 for the show notes on this episode. And happy trails to you. Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Worton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollywharton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Worton. That's patreon.com/Holly Worton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.